Last weekend, as we record this, Steve Borden, retired. Had a happy retirement finally. Very few of those in wrestling where you can build up a retirement of a huge star. And I don't think anyone thinks that it's like a Terry Funk retirement. You know
Right.
what I mean? I think it's there's not that I'm sure there wasn't the first time with everything, but there's like an integrity with this retirement. It seems like it's going to be it.
Right.
And Steve is done. He had his two sons out there dressed as like earlier versions of Sting, and it was a tag match with him and Darby Allin versus the Young Bucks. All went well, tears flowing at the end. Sting goes out AEW Tag Team Champion with Darby, and Lex Luger was there. He was told not to be on camera though because he's got a contract with WWE. Kevin Nash couldn't be there for the same reasons, but they had Magnum TA in the crowd, and Ric Flair was there, and Ricky Steamboat, and it was just a big love fest, and they did a great job, sort of like giving Sting one big send off. But one, Sting's retirement, and two, what Sting has meant to you in your career.
Well, Steve was the first person that I met when I drove down to UWF. Drove straight to the office building, didn't have any idea where to go. And as I get out of the car to walk to in the underground parking to the elevator, Sting and his wife Sue are waiting for the elevator. So I'll just follow him. He'll know where the office is. And we started talking, and turned out that he had a room in their home, dark Dark Angel. I'm trying to think of the real name. Had lived there, and he had just moved out like the day before, and they were renting the room out. So I lived with them for my run in UWF, and both Sue and his wife and him were very gracious, very down to earth, easy to live with, get along with, and this is right at the beginning of Sting's begin in the trajectory up into the stratosphere of our industry. Sting was one of those first guys. You could see him progressing as a wrestler. The match that he had with Flair really was at his peak, I would say, and really helped build him, get him thinking in a different way. And he somehow figured out how to transcend past that first version of Sting, the flat top and the sunglasses and gargoyle sunglasses and all of that, into something darker, moodier, broodier type of character, and that I thought was really smart at the time, because if you go back and look at it, it's when the first Batman movie comes out, and entertainment is sort of going to this darker place. At the same time, Sting becomes the black leather trench coat, crow type character, and they made it work. But ultimately, what made it work, it wasn't the makeup, and it wasn't those characterizations. It was his work. Sting would go out there and give a hard performance, and the one thing I think you could say about him, a little bit older than me, and he's going out there with younger kids, and still performing at a fairly high level. And it ain't easy. It's a lot harder now at this age than it was 20 years ago. But Sting is, like we talked earlier about where the wrestling booking had transcended from black and white to color, and Sting was like that next incarnation, the next guy to figure out how to ride that wave. He and Jim Hellwig had come in as bodybuilders, didn't know much about wrestling, were really green. And I would argue that Jim, in some ways, never really progressed past a certain point, past the gimmick point. Steve had figured out how to work and to go out there and still keep it true to that character, and then put all the other stuff with the dropping in and the bells, buzzers, and whistles that made it really exciting. And I would believe that Steve he certainly made enough money, and I'm guessing we'll still have a role in wrestling somewhere. A lot that he can teach younger kids. So, it's, as you know, as you get older, our business is really hard to walk away from, because it really is a potent drug that we take, being in front of an audience and having fun out there. But Steve will, I'm sure, figure out some way to still be impactful to the business, and yet not have to go out there night to night and take those bumps and everything. But
well, that's what I was actually going to ask. I do apologize, Shane, for interrupting. That's what I was going to ask, because I don't know if it's just me. You can tell me, obviously, better because you know him or knew him over the years. Is he somebody who can just put wrestling away?
Yeah, I think so. I think more so. I don't think that Steve, the things that he had said to me, he really hadn't watched wrestling growing up until he got into bodybuilding and stuff. So I think wrestling to him was sort of like, being a bodybuilder, looking and saying, well, I could probably do that. He's a pretty athletic guy. And, he and Jim start to train, and then they get this, because of the bodies, they get this quick boom right into the business. Where I don't think Jim put a whole lot into learning the craft. Sting obviously did, and working with Flair, I think, was the first real big giant step for him. But it wasn't like, okay, I've worked with Flair, I've made it to the top, I don't have to grow anymore. He continued to grow and change, push the parameters of that envelope that is the Sting character. And that to me shows like an affinity for the business. I won't say a love for the business, but an affinity for the business, being good at it, and being willing to go out there and be hard. I mean, being on the road even when you're making big money is still hard. You have kids at home. You're soon to find out that's a hard thing. But yeah, I think Steve is centered enough to say, okay, this is my stage of my life, and I've got these young men and boys, and I want to be a father, and being able to compartmentalize that stuff. Because in wrestling, you have to really put, okay, here's my kids. I got to put them on the shelf over here because I got to go on the road, and you got to move stuff around, and it's really, really difficult. So I think that he's made enough money. He'll continue to make money from wrestling, and in some way or another, I'm sure, if nothing else, making appearances at conventions. Like where it's
God, I mean, someone can make like what, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a weekend doing stuff like that's crazy money. For like the big stars, it's crazy money.
Yeah, not a bad little gig, right? And he's earned that right. After what, 35, 40 years of being in the business, and being on top like that, for anybody, as somebody who's been in this business and realized how hard it is to even get to the top, but then to get to this top and stay at that top, and to be able to consistently make that big money, it shows that you can sort of put the political side, the BS side of our business to the side, and still go out there. And I would dare say that he was, unlike Flair, in his final match. Sting was relatively, participant in that match. It wasn't, okay, you kids go out and do all the work, and I'll just sit there and look good. Excuse me. He exactly what I would have expected from Sting. But I think he's the kind of guy that can put it on the shelf and say, I don't think he'll ever walk away and say, I'm done with wrestling, never going to be around it again. But you can now, the things like these conventions that we're at today, thousands of people will be here. Those weren't heard of 30 years ago. You couldn't get the thousands of people come see a bunch of wrestlers sitting around. So he'll be able to still partake. He'll be able to have a sip of the old ale, so to speak, and without having to park himself at the bar every night and be in wrestling full time. So congratulations to him. Career well done.